The Geo Archon himself, Zhongli, is back with another rerun, and though not much has changed since his last one, I thought it would still be a good time to talk about him, especially for players who might have missed him last time. Zhongli is an incredibly versatile unit who can be built several different ways and fits into most team comps. He's most famous for his shield, which is virtually unbreakable and provides universal resistance shred. His burst can deal massive damage, and he can even be built as a main DPS. I don't think any character is an absolute must-pull, and the same goes for Zhongli, but he can be a great addition to your account and can be especially valuable if you run main DPS units who benefit from the survivability, knockback resistance, and/or resistance shred like Xiao, Hu Tao, Mel Ganyu, and the newly released Tignari, to name a few. Zhongli's normal attack string deals up to 6 consecutive spear strikes, where the 5th one hits 4 times after he kicks his spear at the enemy, and his charged attack is a lunge forward along a path of spear strikes. The multipliers on his normal attacks are low, but the animations are so cool. His skill, when tapped, provides a pillar that pulses geo damage in a small AoE and has a cooldown of 4 seconds. The resonance from the pillar also interacts with other geo constructs within range, causing them to pulse geo damage the same way. There can only be one pillar present at any time at Constellation 0, and the maximum number of geo constructs at any time is 3, with the exception of Geo Traveler's Burst, which interacts with Zhongli's pillar resonance but does not contribute to the number of maximum constructs. His hold skill deals AoE geo damage, provides a shield based on Zhongli's max HP, and creates a pillar exactly the same as from his tap skill as long as there is not already one present. It has a 12-second cooldown, but his shield has a duration of 20 seconds, giving it 100% uptime as long as you refresh it within that time and it doesn't break. His shield is not only the strongest in the game, but it has 150% damage absorption against all elemental and physical damage, and most importantly, it has that 20% all elemental and physical resistance shred for all enemies within range. This is huge, especially for Geo and Anemo units, since the source of Geo and Anemo resistance shred are few and far between, as well with the release of Dendro and it not being able to be swirled, therefore shredded with Viridescent Venerer. Zhongli's shield is one of the only ways to shred Dendro resistance aside from the new artifact set. His burst sends down a giant rock meatball that can deal incredibly high AoE geo damage with one of the highest scalings in the game, and petrifies enemies it hits for up to 4 seconds depending on the level of the skill, and is further increased up to 6 seconds at Constellation 4. It only costs 40 energy, making it incredibly easy to spam with enough energy recharge, as Zhongli doesn't do the greatest job of batterying himself, but at around 140 as a solo Geo, and you can run less with another Geo unit to battery him, the low energy cost of his burst still makes it pretty easy to get off cooldown. The animation for his burst is quite long at around 2.5 to 3 seconds, so in some cases it can be a DPS loss depending on what team you're running and the rotation, but if you are building him as a burst support, you're working around that anyway. It also has a 12-second cooldown, which lines up perfectly with his shield. His first Ascension passive causes the Jade Shield from his skill to fortify by 5% whenever it takes damage up to 5 times, and lasts as long as the shield is up, further increasing its strength as it takes damage, which is part of what makes it so strong. His 4th Ascension passive increases all of Zhongli's damage based on a percentage of his HP. This is not to be confused with HP scaling, as all of his damage still scales off attack, you just get bonus damage based on his HP, and this can narrow the gap between an HP and attack sands in terms of damage, making an HP sands either just less of a loss or entirely preferable in certain builds depending on substats. His base passive talent refunds 15% of ores used when crafting polearm weapons, which isn't all that exciting, but it comes in handy for some extra resources if you're crafting the Crescent Pike or the Catch. Zhongli is already pretty complete out of the box at C0, but his constellations do build upon his kit, and though would be very nice to have, none are at all necessary. Constellation 1 allows you to summon a second pillar from his skill, C2 grants a Jade Shield when using his burst, which also works on your teammates in co-op, C3 increases his skill level by 3 for more shield thickness, his 4th constellation increases his burst's AoE and adds 2 seconds to the petrify duration, C5 adds 3 levels to his burst for more damage, and his C6 converts 40% of damage taken by the Jade Shield into a bit of healing. Probably the most popular and least material intensive build is as a Shieldbot. As I mentioned, Zhongli's shield is not only the strongest in the game, but also provides that sweet universal resistance shred. Talent priority for Shieldbot Zhongli is his skill, and that's it. You want to level his shield as high as you can, and his burst and normal attacks are unnecessary, so you can leave them unless you absolutely want to level them. The best weapon for Shieldbot Zhongli is definitely the Black Tassel. It's a 3-star weapon, but that doesn't matter because the HP substat from it is all you need for an even beefier shield. As well, being a 3-star weapon, it takes less resources to max out. Another option is the Favonius Lance for the particles it can produce to help battery the team. Its passive doesn't work off field and it requires a little bit of building into crit rate to reliably proc it, but it can be a very good option for its utility. For artifacts, you want to run HP on the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet, or crit rate on the Circlet if you can't get enough from substats when using the Favonius Lance. For substats, you're again just looking for HP percent, crit rate if using Fav Lance, and flat HP. For artifact sets, a lot of people will just recommend the 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith set and call it a day, but I want to talk about that for 1 second. The 2-piece effect grants an extra 20% HP, which is amazing for strengthening his shield, and the 4-piece effect provides 20% attack to all party members for 3 seconds when the holder's elemental skill hits an opponent, which can be procced from off field. This can be great for Zhongli because the pulses from his pillar trigger the effect, but in order to do so you have to manage the positioning of the pillar in order to keep the fight close enough to it so enemies are hit by it, and the pillar can be broken. This can be made more manageable with his C1 though. That being said, the 4-piece set is great on him, those are just some things to keep in mind. The 2-piece is enough though for the HP bonus, so you don't absolutely have to chase after a full set. You can run the 2-piece Tenacity with a mix of any other pieces that have HP as the main and substats, or even a full rainbow set with HP main and substats if you don't want to farm Tenacity at all. As this build doesn't rely on set bonuses, you just want as much HP on your Zhongli as you can get. Another set that can work is the 4-piece Archaic Petra, which gives a 35% elemental damage increase when picking up a crystallized shard of that particular element. Zhongli does have to be the one to pick up the shards though, so micromanaging them can be a little difficult, but if you can pull it off, this set can provide a lot of utility. Talent priority for burst support Zhongli is to prioritize, of course, his burst, but also level his shield equally, or at least close to his burst, and his normal attacks don't need to be leveled. Burst support Zhongli has a lot of different weapons, both 4 and 5-star options that he can make use of, the best being the Staff of Homa. It has a high base attack, huge crit damage secondary stat making it easy to build around, and provides a 20% HP increase as well as converting a percentage of max HP to attack. The extra HP and HP conversion also allow for a smaller gap in damage between using an HP or attack Sands. It is a 5-star limited weapon though, so may the odds be ever in your favor. The Wavebreaker's Fin, particularly at high refinements and in a team of high burst cost units, is one of the best 4-star options, but it's also a limited weapon, so obtaining it can be difficult, and there are other options that make pulling specifically for it unnecessary. The Calamity Queller can be very good for a burst support Zhongli thanks to its elemental damage bonus and the obscene amount of attack it can provide, but its performance is conditional on how many stacks you can get, so damage can fluctuate. The Catch is the best free-to-play option for a burst support build as it provides more than enough energy recharge to spam Zhongli's burst, and its passive provides a damage and crit rate boost to his burst. However, this weapon can be better used by units like Raiden or Shangling, so only use it on Zhongli if they're not using it. Crit rate weapons such as Deathmatch and Primordial Jadewing Spear actually perform quite similarly to each other, the Deathmatch even sometimes beating out the Jade Spear due to Zhongli not being able to make use of the Jade Spear's stacking mechanic, but both provide ease of build thanks to their crit rate secondary stat. The Vortex Vanquisher wins in style, being Zhongli's signature weapon, but sadly is outperformed by all of the previous mentioned weapons. If you want to pull it for the drip though, by all means go ahead. Other options include the Skyward Spine for its high base attack and energy recharge, and performs quite well on Zhongli, so if you're bummed out by pulling it, he can actually make great use of it if you don't have one of the previously mentioned weapons, or need to give one of them to someone else. The Lithic Spear is a decent choice, especially at high refinements and with at least one other Liyue team member. The Blackcliff Pole has a nice crit damage stat, but actually underperforms compared to every other weapon on this list, so it's not worth purchasing from the shop specifically for Zhongli, and you should only use it if you already have it and it's your only option. And last but not least, the Favonius Lance, though not the best for his personal damage, can be one of the best picks for burst support Zhongli for its decent base attack, energy recharge, and team utility. I'll also quickly mention the prototype Star Glitter in case people are curious, since it's a free-to-play craftable weapon. Basically, it's an absolute last resort as it only provides energy recharge and does nothing for Zhongli's damage, so I'd avoid crafting it unless you absolutely have to. For artifact stats, I first want to talk about an HP Sands versus an attack Sands. Zhongli's damage does not scale off HP, it scales off of attack, and I think this is something that some people confuse. The damage conversion from his A4 passive is damage forgiveness, not damage scaling, and an attack sands will almost always result in more damage. That being said, an HP sands will increase the strength of his shield, and though you will lose some damage compared to an attack sands, thanks to his A4 passive, the damage loss is mitigated, especially when using the Staff of Homa, and an HP sands with great substats can perform better than attack sands with bad substats. An HP sands can also be preferable in a hybrid support build where you want his burst to do big damage, but you also still want a strong shield. So you want attack or HP on the sands depending on substats and build preference, a geo damage bonus goblet, and a crit rate or damage circlet depending on which one you need for a good ratio, as always being at least 1 to 2. For substats, you want attack percent, crit rate or damage, energy recharge 120 to 140 depending on team and build, and of course HP percent. Just like weapons, burst support Zhongli's artifact sets are plentiful. A 4-piece emblem of Severed Fate can be best in slot for Zhongli's personal damage at high energy requirements, but you need at least around 150 ER, and because his burst has such a low cost, building ER on Zhongli just for this set can unbalance his other stats. If you have highly contested emblem pieces, the set can be better used by other units, so don't take them away from them to give to Zhongli, as he still has other and sometimes better options. Zhongli is an excellent 4-piece noblesse holder if you don't already have one on the team for its burst damage increase, and he also benefits from the party-wide attack buff. Again though, if you already have a noblesse holder on the team, such as Bennett for example, any 2-piece combo of noblesse, archaic petra, tenacity, 18% attack, and emblem if you need the energy recharge all work and all compare similarly depending on substats. You can also run a 4-piece Archaic Petra for a burst support Zhongli, but all the same caveats as using it on the Shieldbot build apply here. Physical Zhongli. I see a lot of guides say you can build physical Zhongli if you want, but it's not optimal, so I'm not really going to talk about it. Well, for the people who are like, but what if I want to build physical Zhongli? I'm going to talk about it. Physical Zhongli is often steered away because of the low multipliers on his normal attacks, but when built right, he can still output quite a significant amount of damage. Talent priority is his normal attacks first and foremost, followed by his shield because you will still be using it not only for its survivability but also the physical resistance shred, so its uptime is important for damage output. His burst can be left alone as it is a DPS loss in this build, so you probably won't be using it. For physical Zhongli's attacks, the typical combo would be N5D, which is 5 normal attacks into a dash cancel as soon as you kick the spear. This combo is very fast and nets you the most damage, as skipping the 6th hit cuts out the pause between combos, ultimately resulting in more hits in the same amount of time, and when using Crescent Pike, every hit can proc its passive. You can also jump cancel to save stamina, but I personally find the dash cancel easier. There are also other attack combos, including the use of his charged attack, but they are generally more situational, and the N5 dash or jump cancel combo is more universal. Zhongli's absolute best weapon for a physical carry build is the Crescent Pike, especially at high refinements, but even at R1 it beats every other weapon, even 5 stars. The way his attack string works makes him the best user for the weapon, comparable only to Xiangling, but I won't get into physical Xiangling. His fast attacks, as well as the multiple hits of his 5th attack, will always proc the weapon's passive as long as you're picking up energy particles. Note that the damage from the weapon's passive isn't considered normal attack damage, but is physical damage, so cannot be increased by normal attack buffs such as from Yunjin or Zhongli's A4 passive, but can be buffed from damage bonuses from a physical damage goblet, Geo Resonance, and the resistance shred from Zhongli's shield. Next is the Staff of Homa for its high base attack and crit damage, and again its HP to attack conversion increases all of Zhongli's damage. The Primordial Jade Wing Spear sits just below Homa, but does better in this build than in a burst support build, as an on-field Zhongli can maximize and capitalize on the stacks from its passive. The high base attack and crit rate substat are also very nice. Any other DPS weapon that provides attack or crit, like Calamity Queller, Vortex Vanquisher, Deathmatch, or Black Cliff Pole, can all be used, but none compared to the Crescent Pike. An honorable mention goes out to the R5 White Tassel though. It's a 3-star weapon, so has a low base attack, but its crit rate substat and normal attack damage bonus passive actually make it perform quite well, especially when running Yunjin in the team, allowing it to even beat out the Black Cliff Pole, so it is a decent option if you have it at Refinement 5 and running Yunjin if you can't craft the Crescent Pike yet or don't have Homa or Jade. Artifact stats are pretty straightforward. You want an attack sands, physical damage goblet, and a crit rate or damage circlet depending on what you need. For a hybrid DPS Zhongli, you would just run a Geo damage goblet instead of a physical one, and everything else stays the same. An HP sands is not recommended at all for this build as it will significantly reduce your damage, but you can use one with amazing substats temporarily if you need the survivability or don't have a usable attack sands yet. For sets, technically the 4-piece Pale Flame is best in slot, but only provided you can keep uptime on the passive. So again, you need to make sure the enemies are being hit by the pulses from your pillar and that it doesn't break. The best alternative is the 2-piece Pale Flame, 2-piece Bloodstained, as the physical damage bonus from both 2-piece sets is unconditional, so it will perform only slightly worse than 4-piece Pale Flame with its passive up, but better without. A 4-piece Gladiator set can also be used for the 18% attack increase and the buff to normal attacks. It performs slightly worse than the previous two options, but can be viable for its resin efficiency since you can farm it passively from boss drops and the artifact strongbox. A 2-piece Pale Flame or Bloodstained with 2-piece 18% attack set can also be an option depending on substats, followed by any 2-piece 18% attack set, also depending on substats. The 4-piece Retracing Bolide is a decent option if you can maintain the uptime of its passive thanks to the 40% normal attack damage buff when shielded, and you might think that because it's Zhongli you'll have no problem keeping up his shield, but keep in mind that his shield will be significantly weaker in this build than others due to prioritizing other stats over HP. However, this set will perform similarly to a 2-piece physical bonus, 2-piece 18% attack set if you can get 100% uptime on his shield. The last set I want to talk about is the 4-piece Echoes of an Offering. This set can potentially be best in slot for a physical Zhongli, but it depends on a few factors. The first is the infamous problem with the high ping affecting the performance of the set, so it's only viable for players with very low ping. This set also reduces Yunjin's efficacy in the team when running it, but that can be okay if you don't have Yunjin or if she's not built. As well, the normal attack damage bonus is random and does not buff the passive from Crescent Pike, so the damage output of this set can fluctuate greatly. It is a good set when you're running a weapon other than Crescent Pike though, but if you're using Crescent Pike and or Yunjin, the 4-piece Pale Flame or 2 Pale Flame 2 Bloodstained will generally perform better. So Echoes can still perform exceptionally well, just keep in mind that your mileage may vary. For Geo DPS Zhongli, you're most likely using the Microwave team, which is with Geo MC and then typically Bennett and Xiangling, where you abuse the resonance from Zhongli's pillars, especially with his C2, but it's not required, and Geo MC's constructs, and then cook the enemies with Bennett and Xiangling's burst. Xiangling can be swapped out for Albedo for more off-field Geo damage, as well as resonance from Albedo's flower and extra burst damage, though keep in mind that with Albedo's flower counting as a Geo construct, you'll have to micromanage the amount and placement of all your constructs even more, and his elemental mastery buff is a waste, but he can contribute a lot of damage when played right. You can also use Goro for his Geo damage buff and extra batterying, and you can experiment with other combinations too. The only irreplaceable units are Zhongli and Geo MC. The talent priority here depends on whether or not you want to burst with Zhongli, which is recommended but not necessary depending on which comp you're using and how you want to play. So with his burst, you want to level his burst and skill equally, and his normal attacks can be left alone. If you're not bursting, the only talent that needs to be leveled is his skill. Weapons for this build are going to depend on what you have, but the two best options are Staff of Homa followed by Deathmatch. Calamity Queller and Primordial Jade Wing Spear are also great options, and then any damage-focused weapon with the Black Cliff Pole finally being a decent option, though still not entirely worth spending your glitter on specifically for this build, but if you have the glitter to spare or if you already have it, it is technically his best free-to-play option for this build. But if you're a low spender, the Deathmatch beats it by quite a bit. Skyward Spine is a good option for the high base attack and energy recharge if you're going to be using your burst. And the Favonius Lance is one of the best 4-star options for overall team damage thanks to its batterying capability, especially if you're using Xiangling. For artifact stats, it will be attack or HP on the sands depending on substats. The difference between an HP and attack sands is much more minimal in this team, so go with whichever you prefer or has the better substats. Geo damage on the goblet and crit rate or damage on the circlet. For substats, you want energy recharge in the 110 to 130 range depending on whether you're using a 3rd Geo unit or Favonius Weapons. And whether you're bursting or not, you want crit rate and damage, attack percent, and HP percent. For sets, if you are bursting, 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate can be best, but useless if you're not using your burst, and 2-piece combinations of Tenacity, Noblesse Archaic Petra, 18% attack sets, and Emblem if you're bursting are all good options. The 4-piece Husk set can perform surprisingly well in this specific build solely for the 24% geo damage bonus the 4-piece set provides, but I wouldn't farm it specifically for Zhongli, and I wouldn't take the pieces away from units who are actually using them, like if you're using Albedo in this team. Another option is the 4-piece Tenacity set, which can lower Zhongli's personal damage, but the 4-piece set effect can be easier to keep up in this team and can provide higher overall team damage. Now for the super niche builds. These are by no means meta, but can be a lot of fun if you just want to try something new. The first is Pyro DPS Zhongli, which requires a C6 Bennett to infuse Zhongli's normal attacks with Pyro and a general DPS build with a Pyro damaged Goblet. The other is Cryo DPS Zhongli with Chongyun in place of Bennett to infuse Zhongli's normal attacks with Cryo, and in this case you would use a Cryo damaged Goblet. Like I said, these teams aren't exactly meta, but there's something to play around with if you want to experiment with different comps. Speaking of comps, let's finally talk about teams, and this is the easy part. Zhongli as a support can fit into just about any team. His shield not only provides survivability, but also knockback resistance and 20% universal resistance shred. His burst can provide a high instance of geo damage as well as some crowd control thanks to its petrification, and he fulfills both requirements of geo resonance when paired with another geo unit. Notably, units like Hu Tao, Yoimiya, Ganyu, and Xiao all benefit greatly from being paired with Zhongli. Also, as mentioned, any team looking for geo resonance is covered by Zhongli, like with Ningguang or Ito. Some great team comps are Xiao, Zhongli, Sucrose, and Bennett, or double geo, double Anemo, like Xiao, Jin, Zhongli, and Albedo or Geo MC. Yoimiya, Zhongli, Xingqiu or Yilan, and Bennett or Yunjin are all good combinations. The Geo Boys team with Ito, Goro, and Albedo is of course a classic, and Ningguang almost always uses Zhongli, and you can go Ningguang, Zhongli, Bennett, and Mona or Shangling as an example. But he can take the 4th slot in any team you need to fill, being incredibly versatile as a support in general. And for physical Zhongli, you would pair him with an Electro and Cryo support for Superconduct, Fischl and Kaya or Rosaria being great options, but other Electro and Cryo units can work, and the 4th slot can be a flex, Yunjin being the best for Geo Resonance and her normal attack buff, but it can also be a burst support Ningguang who can also hold Thrilling Tales, as well as another Electro such as Beidou if you're running Fischl, as Zhongli's normal attacks will proc Beidou's burst effect in AoE settings. Anyway, I think that wraps it up, and I hope I covered just about everything. I know this video was long, but Zhongli is an incredibly versatile and flexible character to build, and I wanted to go into as much detail as I could. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking through the entire video. As always, thank you so much for watching, like and subscribe for more videos to come, and I will see you next time.